Welcome to The Power of Rhythm, a podcast with your host Reinhard Flatischler around the one thing that connects us all: rhythm.
Hi and welcome to episode 35 of my podcast. My guest today is a musician with an unusual background and a very interesting approach in the realm of music education and performance. He's a senior teacher at the Conservatorium van Amsterdam, and he studied extensively the Indian Karnatic music. And with this knowledge, he developed the program Contemporary Music Through Non-Western Techniques. He composed 3 operas and many more music pieces, all focused on percussion. He also co-founded 2 groups, the Interval Chamber Amsterdam and the Axis Ensemble. Finally, he graduated from the Berklee College of Music in Boston in composition, summa cum laude, and he completed a PhD at the University of Brunel in London. Welcome, Rafael Reina.
Thank you, Reinhard. Thank you for having me in your program, in this podcast.
Yes, it's a pleasure to meet you finally and to learn about these many things. Now, you have several aspects, obviously. One is you are a teacher and educator. You are a composer, obviously, and you have been researching a lot of stuff in India. So let's start from the very beginning. You've been born in Equatorial Guinea, right?
That's correct.
And then came to Spain. So what was your first encounter with music?
Well, it's a very good question, because I think that my first encounter with music is actually has determined the course of my life, musically speaking. So as you said, I was born in a former Spanish colony in Africa. It used to be called Spanish Guinea, and it's Equatorial Guinea since 1968. And actually, my father was a strange character, because he wasn't really someone who knew a lot about music or was a melomaniac or anything like that. But he had one of those old CIA kind of tape players, what is called reel-to-reel in English. And he had a variety of music cultures that was quite flabbergasting. So he loved a lot of African music. Mm-hmm. So a lot of tapes of African chanting or drumming. But my father was from the south of Spain at the same time, so he had a lot of flamenco. But for some reasons that I never understood, he loved Stravinsky and Bela Bartok. So he had quite a lot of music by Stravinsky and Bela Bartok, even Sam Bares. And actually, my very first memory, I must have been 2 or so. It was just seeing a really heavy storm coming, like the cloud, the sky covering these completely black clouds, and you could see the lightning and the raindrops as big as my hand. And my father just had this idea of blasting the Ride of the Spring in the speakers. So I got really, really scared. And I remember just going under my bed there. But then just after a couple of minutes, I got out, and then I was watching this amazing tropical spectacle of lightning, different colors in clouds, and the power of nature together with the Ride of the Spring. So for me, the Ride of the Spring always reminds me of a tropical storm. So that is kind of somehow, in a conscious or unconscious way, has guided who I am musically as a teacher, as a composer, as a founder of different ensembles. What I always wanted to do is just talk about music. For me, to talk about this music belongs to this culture or to that culture, something I never understood. I still don't understand it. So for me, it's like, okay, all this is music done everywhere, and we can just like take and do whatever we want with it.
Okay, now this is a very intense music experience with Stravinsky and a thunderstorm, and very unusual also. And then you came to Spain. Now, how does this lead to South India?
Well, it's a long way in between. Well, first of all, I came to Spain and I started studying music when I was 13. So yeah, I like jazz. I was into jazz. I still listen to Stravinsky and Bela Bartok and some Barès, some Messiaen, but I was more interested at the time things like King Crimson or Weather Report or I don't know, Art Ensemble of Chicago, Archie Sheep.
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in a lot of jazz, but I wasn't really interested in classical jazz. I was interested more in what it used to be called jazz rock or jazz fusion or more contemporary jazz, because I found that rhythmically and color-wise was more interesting. So with all my respect and admiration for people like Charlie Parker and the bebop and all this, I never felt attracted to that. I felt attracted to jazz from Miles Davis, 1960s onwards. And so I started with jazz and well, there was this thing that after quite a few years of huge tyranny there in Equatorial Guinea, my father, there was a military coup in 1979, and so then my father Spain was called back to go there and try to organize things. And actually my father was called back, so then I had a chance to visit him in Spain a few months. So then I started studying some African music. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I got in contact with a few flamenco musicians who wanted to do things combining some jazz. So then I found myself playing bass. Before Paco de Lucia came out with his famous electric sextet, I was playing bass with this flamenco group. And so, yeah, I found that I learned some flamenco and I was very interested. I learned some African music. I went to Morocco several times. So I started collecting material at a time that was very difficult to collect non-Western material in audio. And so it was a time how I managed to get to Berkeley is a long story, but I got there and I already had this background of non-Western music inside of me from my upbringing to all those years. And well, Archie was influenced by African music, so was Art Ensemble of Chicago sometimes. So, I found myself, whether I liked it or not, or I wanted it or not, listening to music that in one way or another had non-Western influences.
But we're still not in India, and it seems like Karnataka really made a very big influence, more than any other music. Am I right? Yeah. So, but all this is kind of and kind of sowing the field in a way. Mm-hmm. So I moved to Amsterdam, and just after a few days, it's a long story how we met, but I met this amazing singer Jana Vijayaprakash and a percussionist Angie Ravi, and I saw this concert, and it was over 2 hours long, and it was only voice and this instrument that I didn't know how it was called at the time. It's called the mridangam, and I could not believe that they could hold my attention with such an intensity for 2 hours. So then I went immediately to them and I said, I need to take lessons with you. I need to know what you're doing here because this is amazing. So they were staying for a few weeks, doing some projects. I started there, and then I started just going
to Bangalore, staying with my teachers, and just going to every rehearsal, every concert he gave, tour. So I just really dived into the Indian life. And for months, I wouldn't see a white person. So I started eating with my hands and started doing everything very Indian. So
now, Rafael, for our listeners, let's a little bit clarify. Like in India, there are two big systems, the Hindustani in the north and the Karnatic in the south. I have been involved a lot in the Hindustani. I've been studying Bhagavad and Tabla, and there's the Chatti, there's the Samtali Kali with the Angas and the Lyres. Could you lay out for us what's the difference, in your opinion, about the Hindustani and the Karnataka rhythm system? How do they approach rhythm? Similar, different, the same?
I think we have the main factor here, rhythmically, is the fact that in South Indian music, you have a tala keeper. You have someone who is visually keeping the tala for all musicians. So that somehow is, in a way, it's like having a conductor. Not really, because a conductor is really guiding you, whereas the tala keeper is just keeping the tala, and it's like a visual metronome, right? So that has enabled the role of the percussion to develop not as a mattress to the melody, which is more the case in Hindustani music or in most non-Western cultures, but has a similar role. They are really interweaving polyrhythms and polypulses continuously, because the singer or whoever the melodic instrument is doesn't really need to have an audio of how the tala should sound like. Doesn't really need to have a pattern that keeps repeating with variations. Like in Hindustani, you find more variations than in other cultures. But in a way, the lack of having to fulfill a role for someone else enables the percussion to really go absolutely crazy and develop things that are really going completely against what the voice is doing. The voice is, to say, one instrument, or the violin, and they're not going to be freaking out because it's like, oh, I don't know where the tala is. Because if that person gets lost, it's just going to look at the tala keeper and it's going to say, okay, we're here, so I can pick up if I get lost. So I think that is what has made the bigger difference. And then everything, the development in both cultures kind of derive from there.
Okay.
Why Carnatic music has gone to the extremes of being a very complex rhythmical system, and is far more complex than Hindustani or any other non-Western culture in the world. So, and I think it's due to that fact that you don't need to be helping anyone to recognize a tala. You have a visual reference, so then the percussion is free to elaborate phrasing and polyrhythms.
Well, you do have tala keeping, like, the hand signs, also in a tabla solo or in a Bhagavad solo many times, but not as extensive as in the Carnatic music. Now, before we go on to talk, maybe for our listeners, I'm going to play the first thing you have sent me. And actually, you have to explain a little bit what is Srangang Tong. What is the name Srangang Tong?
Actually, that was a project of the Amsterdam Percussion Group, and they gave a commission to different composers to write pieces with different influences that happen in Suriname. So, Suriname is a former Dutch colony. So then they wanted to have a composer who would write something with Indonesian influences. Also, there is a big Indian influence in Suriname, Chinese. So then they had different pieces. So then Sranang Tongo is actually Papiamento, the language is spoken in Suriname. and it means all the languages.
Okay. So let's listen to all the languages, okay? Sranang Tongo from Rafael Reina for 4 classical percussionists and 2 Indian masters, right? Did you write this out on score all?
Yeah, I did. That part, yeah, for the Carnatic percussionists, I wrote everything down. And for the singer, it was my teacher. That part is completely written out. Other parts are kind of, I give her some ideas of what I want. I just give her some freedom. But this part is completely written out.
Yeah. What's the interesting thing in your music, we will have more examples from your music, is that, well, here is our voice as we speak. It's the recitative side, yeah? It goes like free, and then it's a pause, and then long, and then short. And then there is this, thing where it's just an ongoing pulse. And you're playing very much back and forth between these two, right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
So now you have also composed 3 operas. I've composed 2 orchestral suites. I've never touched an opera yet. How did this come about?
Well, 2 operas. I mean, for orchestra, I've written only 1 opera. It was Barcelona Orchestra and Choir. And I've written 2 other pieces for orchestra, but not for the opera. For the opera, it was more like a big chamber ensemble. Well, how it came about, there were 2 actually in collaboration with Germany, and it was like more what you could say falls in between music theater and opera.
Okay.
So, in the sense that you had actors and dancers on stage, which is pretty much the way opera is done in South India. In South India, they have really long operas. So then all the musicians sit, including the singers, sit on one side. And then you have actors that sometimes talk, but it's very visual. It's a bit like dance theater in a way. Maybe not as sophisticated as dance theater has been developed in the West, but sometimes they talk, but most of the time it's visual. So what we did, I got together with this theater director who I met in Cologne. Her name is Petra Weima, and at the time when we first met in Cologne, she was heavily involved with contemporary theater and stuff, and she thought, why don't we do something that is not a typical music theater, which is like the music just in the background and people talking, and it's not the typical opera with the singers, whoa. And I said, well, I'm all for it, because I'm not really so keen on the operistic approach of voice. I particularly prefer kind of other coloraturas like black voice or Indian voice rather than white voice in general. The first idea was based on this stories he had. Was about Adolf Welfli, and I don't know, probably it's more known in Germany, in the German world. So we created something that was really, really very interesting, very very interesting stuff. So yeah, there was a DVD that came out of that, and years later, through my teacher, she wanted to do something based on the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the cornerstones of Hindu philosophy. So when we were getting ready to apply for money and funds and all this stuff, then my teacher died suddenly. So then we were left with a great idea, but it was a bit too big for us. Then what we did is we started researching different angles to the Bhagavad Gita, and we spent a whole summer in India talking to from Bollywood producers to high priests who knew a lot about the Bhagavad Gita, and a lot of things in between, just to get different versions, different visions on the theme. So then we kind of decided, okay, we're going to take 5 of the main pillars of the Gita, and we're going to put it in the context of someone who doesn't really know what to do with his life, and he goes to India because, okay, India is the place of spirituality, and then it's this very abstract theme because there he finds Hermann Hesse living in India somehow, but it's not really living. It's kind of in a dream world. So it's all very oniric, if you want. It's very, very interesting. So then we take like several themes of our kind of things that we are more used to, and then we try to adapt these 5 main cornerstones of the Bhagavad Gita to situations, but create a whole narrative that makes sense, like make different sketches.
Okay, so, the piece of Hesse India that you sent me, is this a cornerstone too, or what could you say to that?
I don't know, I sent you 3, so I don't know which one.
Okay, let's listen first, then we know what it is, okay?
Yes.
Rest swimming or drowning, life's river swiftly flows, washing all with its waves. You still stand on the shore, fears hold you down. Your voices accuse you of running away. But what is real? What true safety? These shores but leisure garden, where the senses mislead, magic theater of endless desires, where inner eyes quarrel and disguise. The battle of the soul, the search for true wisdom eternal can begin. Your ferry awaits, your ferryman
Hesse India, composed by Rafael Reina. That's a very, very curious tune. You know, who is the female voice in that?
It's fantastic. She's actually more of a jazz singer, and she's also teaching in my in the program I built for the Conservatorium in Amsterdam. Her name is Christina Fuchs. She's actually from Switzerland, and she actually studied in India with a singer, and she studied my program for 3 years, and she has done a lot of contemporary music, but she has this perfect pitch. And what I really liked is that she didn't sing with this vibrato, so she could really sing more the Indian ornamentation that's called gamakas. So and so she could sing what I wrote. Yes.
Right. The question that I had before, is this one of the cornerstones of the Bhagavad Gita?
Actually, this is possibly the most important. According to Gandhi, this part corresponds in a way, and the lyrics have been written by my wife, who is actually Scottish, and she wrote this, and is this part is called delusion, and delusion is the state where a lot of people get or fall after. Yeah, you can say delusion, disappointment. Basically, it's a very Indian philosophical thing. You know, you have to do things with care, but without expecting any fruit to your action. And that's part of the Dharma. You know, you need to do things, you have to do things, but don't expect. And in the West, we always attach expectations to whatever we do. And if those expectations don't come out, then we feel deflated. We feel in delusion. And then when we feel like that, then it's like, you know, you just try to grab onto whatever to get you out of that state. And that's when many people fall into, you know, abuse of alcohol, drugs, false gurus, you name it. So, so that's one of the cornerstones. Yeah,
that's very interesting, because when I was 15, I was actually the first time hitchhiking to India, and in my pocket was the Bhagavad Gita, reading about, you know, doing the thing but not being attached to the outcome. So this is very beautiful music. Now, I'm very interested in one thing. You said a sentence that goes like this: the large variety of rhythmic devices used in Karnataka music is potentially most universal. Would you say the Carnatic elements in rhythm that you took, are they archetypes? Are they universal? Explain this to us, please.
Okay, yeah. Because I was a composer and not an ethnomusicologist, I wasn't really interested in how what it is that is done in most concerts in Carnatic music, but I was interested more in the architecture. What are the elements that happen here, and luckily Jana Vijayaprakash and B.C. Manjunath, who recorded with the Amsterdam Percussion Group, and N.G. Ravi, were people who were really into elements that up until a few years ago were considered like things that all musicians should study, but it's more like an academic study that you shouldn't really use for concerts. That was like the general idea. So then to hear one of these elements, you might hear one out of 50 concerts, one piece for like 3 minutes. So I'm not saying that the rest I wasn't interested, but let's say that 50% of what you can hear in a Carnatic music concert wasn't elements that I consider could really help me with my composition, or to be able to come up with a whole pedagogical method that would help, basically what I teach at the conservatory, classical performers to improve their rhythmical skills in order to perform contemporary music, or composers and improvisers to think more rhythmically, not rhythm as something that is numbers against numbers, which is something that is like we have 13.5 against 11 3/4, getting away from this kind of new complexity. So while keeping the complexity, having those elements in Carnatic music that enable the musician to practice it.
Okay.
So then I got really deep into elements that were barely used in Carnatic music. But the funny thing is, like, now it's create a boomerang effect. So then, because I published the book and the book got to India through those people who were doing those sort of things, now there is a whole festival dedicated to innovation in Madras. And there are many, many musicians in Bangalore as well who are just say, okay, we can do this. Let's do this. This is great. So now there is much more integration of this more complex material. So it took a while for us, for my teachers and me to find this common ground, because when they were teaching me things, I was like, well, but this in Western music, we already have it in this way or another. What I'm interested is in what you have that we don't have. And there, after the second visit, then it's like we started to really find this common ground, and then they started just kind of throwing things there. It's like, hey, wait a second, what you just did? Oh, and then all of a sudden they just did something that opened a huge window, and I was able to restructure that to create a methodology by which musicians could practice it, and then face a piece by Lachemann or Stockhausen or Elliot Carter or whatever.
Cool. And that's what you do in your educational programs, right? Before we do that, because you have so much great music here, I want to play a poet in New York, which is done by a text of the Spanish poet Garcia Lorca that you obviously know.
Yes.
Okay, so let's listen to that.
La luz es sepultada por cadenas y ruidos. En impúdico reto de ciencias sin raíces. En los barrios hay gentes que vacilan insomnes, como recién salidas de un naufragio de sangre. Debajo de las multiplicaciones hay una gota de sangre de pato. Debajo de las divisiones hay una gota de sangre de marinero. Debajo de las sumas, un río de sangre tierna. Un río que viene cantando por los dormitorios de los arrabales. Es plata, cemento o brisa, el alba mentira de Nueva York. Existen las montañas, lo sé. Los anteojos para la sabiduría, lo sé. Pero yo no he venido a ver el cielo. He venido para ver la turbia sangre. ¡Sangre! Que lleva las máquinas a las cataratas. Y el espíritu a la lengua de la cobra. Todos los días se matan en Nueva York 4 millones de patos. 5 millones de cerdos, 2.000 palomas para el gusto de los agonizantes, 1 millón de vacas, 1 millón de corderos, 2 millones de gallos que dejan los cielos hechos añicos. Más vale sollozar afilando la navaja o asesinar a los perros en las alucinantes cacerías. Resistir en la madrugada los interminables trenes de leche. Los interminables trenes de sangre y los trenes de rosas maniatadas. Los comerciantes de perfumes. Los patos y las palomas y los cerdos y los corderos ponen sus gotas de sangre debajo de las multiplicaciones. Y los terribles alaridos de las vacas estrujadas llenan de dolor el valle, donde el agua se emborracha con aceite.
Poet in New York, composed by Rafael Reina. It's a piece for 4 percussionists and voice for the Amsterdam percussion group. What I really find fascinating is that there is a meter tangible, then it dissolves, and then you have just a statement of the drum again. It gives in the meter, goes back and forth. I find this in your music very typical, and I like it a lot, I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, a very personal question. You have a lot of students, and what would you give them? You have done what you wanted to do all your life. You pursued your desire. You found out what was in India, and you went to the Bhagavad Gita and so on. What would you tell them, a secret of your life that could help their lives?
I did everything because I wanted to do it without expecting anything. I never expected I could make a living as a composer. I never expected I could create a program that would be so successful. And so actually, the name of the program has changed. So it used to be called Contemporary Music Through Non-Western Techniques. Now we have a kind of bachelor's program that is called Advanced Rhythm, and a master's program that is called Applications of Karnatic Rhythm to Western Music. So maybe you took that from an old CV of mine. I think basically all my life, I just went for what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I never thought how this is going to have economic consequences in my life. I just went for it. And I believed in what I was doing. And then most of it happened that gave me my bread, so to speak. So there were times that wouldn't give me that, and then I would need to resort to other things. So occasionally I had to do other things, but I would say 80% of what I've done in my life is what I wanted to do, without thinking, oh, I'm breaking ground, or without thinking this is amazing. It's just like, I like this. I just want to do this. And I find this fascinating. I'm just going to go for it. So I think in a way, I was already living before I met the Bhagavad Gita, that idea that, okay, you do things because you really care. And if it happens, happens. If it doesn't happen, doesn't happen. But the time that you were doing it was great. So when I was going to India and spending months there, I was just enjoying every minute of it. And someone at that time would have told me that years later I would have a PhD and I was about to start a postdoctoral research, and I would have triggered partly a revolution in Carnatic music. I would have said, come on, you got to be drunk, So
I think it's a very important lesson for anyone who's learning, because they're coming and learning. And now it's the balance of keeping the fire. They come for, hopefully with fire to see what they can, learn. But then they also need to know, just follow that and don't expect anything. Let things unfold. And then we come back to the Bhagavad Gita, yeah, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So finally, let's go to the chaos part of Wölfli. Explain this a little. How is Wölfli a journey into chaos?
Well, that's a good question. We we established a parallel, and this was more the theater part than me, but I just went with the music with it because of Adolf. So you have Adolf Welfli, who was someone that was basically mentally deranged, and he spent many years in a mental asylum. And at the end, he created this art brut. He created this kind of painting and drawings, and so then he went from a complete chaos, because he even killed a couple of small girls without knowing it, without realizing that he was killing anyone. And while he was in this mental asylum, he just decided to be creative. So then we established an opposite parallel with Adolf Hitler, who wanted to be a painter and became the biggest distractor of at least the 20th century, together with Stalin, right? So in a way, we established this parallel, and out of the craziness of Adolf Welfli, Adolf Hitler comes out. So at one point, you have both characters on stage, doing quite crazy things, I would say.
So let's listen to Welfli and see what we can hear from that, right?
Yes.
Wölfli, an opera composition by Rafael Reina, a co-production of Healing Theatre Cologne and the Interval Chamber Amsterdam that you have also co-founded, as I know. Wow, what a theme! I didn't know that background. It's and again we have that kind of almost like the Norns, the ones who dictate the face. These drums coming in again, It's very deep. Thank you very much, Rafael, for sharing all these things today with us. Any final thing you want to share with us?
Any final thing? Gosh.
You don't have to, but it's just a question.
I don't know. I think, I'm just waiting to see if we get this postdoctoral thing, which is actually we are 8 researchers from 7 different countries and different cultures, and we want to try to do something, trying to get together a new pedagogical approach that will really contemplate non-Western music, not as something that, okay, it's this little bit here, this little bit there, you can learn djembe here or tabla there, but something that is taken more seriously in the Western academia. So we have applied to the European Research Council. We're waiting for results for next year. And I just hope that we can get the funds, because it's a very ambitious project. And we try to get rid of this is that, but try to say, okay, this is music, and we should stop just looking at Western music as the only music that needs to be taught in the West. It's time to recognize, if we want globalization, it's not only to sell Coca-Cola to Africa. It needs to be a two-way road in a way. So, that's my immediate project somehow. And that's the only thing I wanted to share with you, because it's
absolute great. We certainly cross the finger for you that you get these funds. Wonderful project you have put into the world. Can you let us know where people can find you on the net?
I think the easiest, if they can Google my name, and they'll probably find very easily a link to the book, or a link to what I teach at the conservatory. We're actually 6 teachers now, because trying to remember, if someone remembers applications of Karnatic, is the only thing they're gonna find. Is either the name of the book or the name of the program. So there they can find it. If they Google Karnatic, they're gonna find a lot of things before that. So either my name or applications of Karnatic, and I will take them.
Again, Rafael, thank you so much for the time. It was very fascinating to hear your music, hear the stories behind it, and what you have created. Congratulations, actually.
Thanks a lot for inviting me to this. I really appreciate it.
Now, if you like our podcast and you have been fascinated by our talks and by the music we play, visit us at powerofrhythm.com/podcast. You can leave a comment, and if you like, you can also leave a wish for someone you want me to talk to. For now, all the best, have a great time, and keep on growing.